and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And in this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back Steve Hackett. Now, Steve's promoting the Circus and the Night Whale album, but also you're doing the Genesis Greats and also Lamb Lies Down and you solo stuff. And this is a tour that starts on October the 2nd. But you've also recently come back from Hungary where you've been playing with Jab. Is that the right way to pronounce it?
Jobby, yeah.
Jobby.
Yep.
I love that. I love the music you do with that band. It's absolutely gorgeous. And recently, you've reissued two of your classical albums, Bay of Kings from 1983 and Momentum from 1987.
Yeah.
And I'd like to start there. Now, my first question, Steve, is in the sleeve notes of the first one. It says, you say, I count myself lucky that I was self-taught and I was never graded, so the joy was never kind of left me. That sounds like you saw all of the musicians kind of pounded into the ground by their tutors. Is that?
Yes. It's a funny thing. Christopher Warren Green, who great violinist and conductor, was at school with my brother.
Oh yeah.
We spent some time together, and I said to him, "Oh, maybe I should take lessons and do this, that, and the other." He said to me, "Don't." He said, they'll knock the stuffing out of you, knock you down. He said, "You do naturally what the right thing, dynamics and the sort of romantic style of stuff." And so I thought I'd take his advice. I learned to read music in order to do a couple of Bach things, but I'm very, very slow. I'm not a sight reader. I have to work it out, I spell with the aid of a dictionary almost, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But most of what I've done has been by ear. And but I think because of that, I've gotten involved in lots of different styles without anyone telling me that I was doing it wrong. I think if you're following your heart with music, you can't really go wrong. I've had this thing with Roger King. He'll sit down and play a piece of Bach perfectly on piano, and I said, "Well, would you like to record that? We could do that." He said, "Oh no, there are people who can do that better than me." And I say, "Well, I know that there are people who can play Bach better than me, but they won't feel it better than me. If I feel it, then it's going to be authentic. So I want to be involved with music that's authentic emotionally, whatever it might be, whether that's progressive or blues or Bach, as long as it's real for the musician who loves it, that's going to communicate in some way." So that's the only banner that I kind of ride in on.
I mean, I think it's amazing. I mean, my wife went to Birmingham Conservatoire, and so she's a violinist, and two of my sons play classical guitar, and they had lessons. So when I was playing the album, especially Momentum, especially on side 2, and they were going, "God, this is absolutely amazing." I said, "It's Steve Hackett," and I said, "He's completely self-taught," and they were going, "Really?" Because they said your tremolo technique and the way you play on is. It's amazing. And also, I mean, for what Sue was saying, when you play like Chopin or Sartre or Bach, usually you have someone telling you how to interpret it stylistically. But of course, as you've just said, you interpreted it based on how you felt.
Yeah, I think, that tremolo technique, that one, I think it's the most difficult of all techniques. And it comes and goes with me, I have to say. The nails have got to be right. The conditions have got to be right. You've got to be warmed up and all that. So I sympathize with anyone who thinks I've got perfect vibrato. I think it's a little bit like photographing fairies' wings in a gale or a hurricane. It's to be on it, you've got to be so centered. But it's a wonderful technique. If you can get the guitar to trickle like that. And I often think of water. Maybe it's because I'm Aquarian. I don't know if it's got anything to do with that in the cosmic sense of the word. But I think where music sounds like water, that is something that's just absolutely beautiful. You can get it with, well, many examples of classical music. Some of those piano impromptu pieces have got that quality. Schubert, that's it, the impromptu. It's incredibly moving from the word go, and it just keeps motoring in a Bach-like sort of way. Keeps coming back to Bach, doesn't it? Really,
Yeah, I know that Bach and Beck, isn't it? Are the two
there we
parts
are.
of the thing for yourself. Because
Jeff Beck,
I love these albums, and I know that other of my favourites I don't think are out yet or on vinyl, or they haven't been for a long time, is Midsummer's Night Dream with the Royal Philharmonic. I love that one, and obviously the more recent one, Under a Mediterranean Sky. But these two are kind of just solo performances, and for me personally, when these arrived in the 80s, my mind was on other things, like you know, I was going out on a Friday and Saturday night. It was more rock orientated. These albums, listening to them now, they're timeless. And you mentioned about the idea of water. I actually put down, it reminded me of the gentlest notes, like falling like raindrops, just in the around you. And I think it's
nice thought,
because it's like, it's almost like taking your vitamins when you play music like this, in a way, with everything that's going on in the world. It just takes you somewhere.
Well, I think, the subtext of music, I'm getting philosophical here, but it is to heal. It is to re-energize people. Why do people listen to it in the first place? And it is a fast, decoupling, destructive world that we're seeing at the moment. And yes, if we could get everyone to sing the same tune, maybe that would be something. I know there have been efforts by Daniel Barenboim, back to classical, of the orchestra that was made up of Israelis and Palestinians. I mean, what an incredible thing. But yeah, music heals. It really is medicine. Not just for the spirit. I've seen what music can do. It is magic. It can do all sorts of things. Oliver Sacks, the books that he wrote, The Doctor, talking about moving music. A woman who would not be able to move, Parkinsonism and akinesia, and becoming absolutely frozen like a statue. Until she was played a piece of music that moved her emotionally, and then she could move physically. So that this direct correlation with all that stuff. So it's not just hippiedom saying this.
I totally agree. It's my slogan is music is the healer in the doctor, and I think that you can have the busyness of what's going on around you, and you put an album on like Momentum, and it changes the atmosphere of the room that it's being played in, and it's you almost mentally go down to a pace slower. Of the music. Yeah, you slow down.
I think when I was doing those two albums, both Bay of Kings and Momentum, I was probably playing a lot slower than I play these days. I think, this thing about technique enables you to play faster the more you practice. But I was convinced that it should be music for siestas, really. That was really it. So a music that might be half listened to as part of an environment, with a glass of wine or just something on in the background. Sweeten the pill. Yeah.
I can actually put down that the album was like having a glass of wine, but you could have it while you were driving because it's just the music. It has that effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I find when driving, I need to play rock music to keep me awake. But classical music, if it's too enticing, could just sort of have you heading towards the lay-by and into the ditch. The tranquilizing effect of all of that.
Do you think, though, it also has an effect on where you and Joe are in the world? Because you go to lots of culturally rich places and you love traveling, and obviously, the way that Joe writes as well. So does that inspire how you pick up things from the culture you're within or the landscape?
I think so. I think landscape very often comes into it. I mean, often when I'm in somewhere like Italy or Spain,
Yeah,
Spain, of course, the home of the guitar, but I also think that Mediterranean link, for instance, when you're in, if you ever get to visit Perugia, and just before you get into the main town, these hilltop towns often have the most incredible overlooks, and you're looking into a valley, usually from something, some sort of ornate
yeah,
balcony or something that the whole town can do. And immediately music comes to mind. And I think, yes, it's that type of music that it's taking stock and seeing nature. And again, the healing nature of nature itself.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's all part of that flow. I guess it's that Orphic idea, isn't it, of music where he was apparently supposed to be playing the harp, and
yes, yeah,
the rocks and the streams would stop to listen. The idea of music casting a spell. It's a metaphor and symbolic, all that stuff. But the idea that the world might slow down and it might be a good thing. Yes.
yeah. Because I mean, because there is a rhythm in the sounds of nature, isn't there? Whether it's bird song or the sounds of the waves, there is a kind of rhythm.
Yes.
So I mean, when we were playing the album this morning, we had it at volume so you could still hear the seagulls in the background. We live near the sea here, and it works.
Right.
It just works. I just want to changing tact a little bit now because I know Jeff Beck is with Bach because we're going from classical to rock.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jeff Beck is like the Miles Davis of the electric guitar in some ways, but he was very mischievous, very kind of playful in how he always seemed to be thinking, well, I'll do this. They won't be expecting me to do this, but
yes.
Do you think you've picked up some of that? And the reason I say that is because when you were playing the electric guitar, and you said, I think when I spoke to you previously, that as you've got older, you've got sometimes more aggressive and angry when you're playing, and you play really tough shredding, and the tremolo arm must wonder whether it's going to stay on the guitar by the end of the night. And then equally, you can play, as I said, the most gentlest of stuff. It's almost as if there are several artists in one pair of hands.
Well, for instance, when I was with the Jarby guys, and you're quite right about Jeff Beck, absolute master of the unexpected. I think he used to say he thought his job was to come out of the woods with both guns blazing, and he had that almost a sort of gunslinger's thing. There was that, but I was just playing with Jarby, and one of the guys, Thomas Barabbas, the bass player, has written a really beautiful song about his daughter Francesca when she was born, and they show a picture of her as a baby, and it's the gentlest of songs, and he wanted me to play on it, and I thought, how do I do this without disturbing it? So I've got my Fernandez guitar, the Sustainer, and I had my whammy pedal, so I had a clean guitar sound with some echo on it, and I took it up the octave, and I just made these sort of sighing, cooing sort of noises. So it sounded a little bit like a synth, but deliberately playing in a non-competitive, exploratory kind of way, as if a child was looking around, trying to make sense of their innocence, I guess. A beautiful song. So that's a very different thing to making the police car noises and the chase sequence that guitars are perfectly capable of, whether it's police car noises or motorbikes revving up and the whole car crash aspect of that. So the electric is a very adaptable instrument in that way. It's lots of different personalities can come out of that pantheon of sounds, I think.
Yeah. So you've got the tour starts in October, and you've picked some songs from your latest album, which couldn't have been very easy to do.
Not easy, no.
And I mean, I know Ghost Moon and Living Love isn't in there at the moment. Might it be?
I haven't at the moment. I keep thinking to myself, if if I'm really brave one day, I'll try and do the entire album.
Oh,
If only I could talk myself into that, because I'm very proud of the album
it's
as a
theatre.
finished
Yeah, it's
thing.
brilliant.
It was again largely encouraged by Jo, my wife, having recorded 2 tunes prior to the album, and then having had a break. Those tunes were kind of autobiographical, and they were pretty sort of angry things. And one was more of a love song that I wanted to dedicate to her, Wherever You Are. And so it was a cross between a rock song and a love song, which isn't always easy to do.
No,
Because you could be too cloying or whatever. But somehow, when I hear it back, I think, no, it's taking me with it, and it feels right. And again, she said, well, why not make the whole album autobiographical? So that's what I did. So it became a bit of a sort of, there's the challenge to self-commission. And how do you do that? So the first track, People of the Smoke, which we open with, funnily enough, and that wasn't written at that point. I thought, well, how do I describe what that was like? Forgive me if we've said this before.
No, we haven't.
The idea of going back to 1950, the year of my birth, what did radio sound like? What did you hear from it? And having snippets from actual radio at that time. So a kind of soundscape before we start that gets interrupted by a string orchestra, or rather an orchestra not in real time, but with Roger King's deft hands. That comes blasting in a sort of, I think in a sort of ELO meets Beatles type manner, really.
Yeah.
And then so I've always loved that era of the Beatles with George Martin doing those extra embellished arrangements behind very often simple songs, but suddenly replete with detail. I'm thinking of I Am the Walrus. That's a favourite of lots of musos because the arrangement is extraordinary.
It is, yeah.
A musical cartoon just for openers. And I think that I remember, I think it was Jeff Lynne, or it may have been Roy Wood, who was involved with ELO early days, saying, to take the baton on, perhaps, and paraphrasing here, of where the Beatles left off with that kind of material, that kind of mixture of old and new instruments, electric and acoustic, together, and almost as if you were living in 2 different time frames at the same time. So that was part of the appeal, the surprise that wasn't lost on Jeff Lynne, of what the Beatles have done with Sgt. Pepper, of course, because we're always quoting at us musicians. That always seems contemporary to us. I think it's not that it's of the 60s; it's of now in terms of its outrageous, imaginative. Here comes this lot. Here comes that lot. Here's that lot. Here's the brass band. There's that. Here's the electric guitar, and everything has its space. And they took you on that journey, that collage through time.
Well, I think that might be something to look forward to later on, because obviously the album is a story, and it must have been quite difficult to decide what to take out of the story, which of course leads straight into The Lamb Lies Down, which is another story where you've taken out bits of it that you felt didn't flow so well. I have to say, looking at the set list, that you've created probably a very good interpretation of what the album, how it could flow, because I know it's got this mythical standpoint now as being one of the greatest concept prog albums, but you were just a bunch of young guys going through all sorts of things, like relationships breaking down, having children, trying to, and obviously with Peter having this vision. When you revisited these songs, did you feel it was a chance to play them maybe differently than when you were recording it in the first place? Was it a different way of looking at the songs again?
Well, I feel that if you're going to do part of an album that's very narrative driven, they have to work as separate entities, because you aren't going to be able to get across the entirety of the story. Particularly with this tour, I wanted to have time to show different eras of Genesis.
Yes, of course.
To have some Selling England by the Pound, we do 3 things from that, for instance. So 3 things from Circus and the Night Whale, 3 things from that, much more from Landmarks Down on Broadway. But the best of all of these albums, they work separately, apart from their conceptual context, if you like.
Yeah.
They've got to be able to stand alone. The best music, you should be able to listen to it and not realize what it's all about at all, and perhaps read the words later. For music to work on a number of levels, that's the challenge. How do you grab people from the word go?
Because going back to that period of your career, some of the kind of solos you did were almost part of the compositional aspect of the songs. So they were kind of, which must be how later on when you went solo, Mike Rutherford kind of just followed that. But now just thinking of songs like, I mean, I don't know because I've not heard you play it in the new tour, but Fly on a Windshield.
Yes.
The original, it feels like it's such a great chord sequence to solo over and such a chance for strong melodies. Is that giving you a chance to stretch out?
Absolutely. I do stretch out on it. And I've sometimes played that with 2 guitarists.
Oh, right.
It can work very well. So there might be some surprises for the tour. I won't say when, who, but because you're reminding me about that. But it's so strong chordally.
Yeah.
What we were thinking at the time was, as we were jamming that, and Phil was just doing this sort of drum beat without embellishment, thinking of the Ben-Hur score, the ramming speed aspect of the guy pounding out the rhythm as the slaves are doing whatever it is, warp speed, attack speed, rowing speed. I can't remember all the various speeds, but the idea of that kind of the unstoppable civilization, the advance of that, and it also had a slightly Egyptian.
Yes, thing. Yes, that kind of Eastern feel to it, hasn't it?
It had that sort of Eastern thing as well, and I think the fact that Tony was playing chords where all the harmonies were not filled in, which enabled the guitar to perhaps do that, and I was, funny enough, I was playing it with Jarby in Hungary, and the keyboard player said to me, "This isn't really a fixed melody, is it? You're improvising over the top." So absolutely, there might be just a couple of phrases as cues in there, but the idea is to be able to float around and to be able to swim through that. It's important that the keyboards are loud.
Yeah.
They get the wall of sound, the wall of death, as it were, that is that, and to be able to move within it. It's almost as if I don't want to be a lead player. I want to be part of the ensemble. And that's the challenge of that piece. The power of ensemble playing, the team, everyone, the wall. It's not just guitar heroes out front. That's really not what I think the best of Genesis was all about. And I like to think that, the best of what I do, very much taking that on. You mentioned Mike Rutherford and the early days of Genesis. He said, I think it's always best to write guitar solos so that it never falls below a certain level. And of course, I'd come out of a blues tradition before that. I thought, write a solo, what's he talking about? But absolutely right. So you can go with the written stuff, but you can also dance outside of it. You can indeed dance, but musically perhaps.
Yeah, because there are so many strong melodies which you must be enjoying. Revisiting, like Hairless Heart is another one. It's got, again, just a beautiful, almost hypnotic, meditative one as well. And of course, the way the album started, was how you finish this section of the set. But as you revisit them, you can't help but as a musician, you've grown so much over the decades. So you're going back and you can't
Yes.
recreate it exactly as it was because you're not the same person.
No,
You've been through so much
exactly.
more.
And I think, I live with this stuff and it haunts me. And there are times when I think um, keyboards were emulating string sections. And then you get a moment of RMI piano put through
Yeah.
which is a slightly distorted sound anyway, put through a phasing thing. And then as it does that, it almost becomes orchestral, where it's almost as if someone was doing a sort of harp glissando through something. And so there's a side of me that goes, maybe one day we should have real brass with that and real strings and go the whole Ravel journey with that, because it also alludes with the chord change up a tone to the major. It alludes to bolero. It's his nearest relation. But there's something of Led Zeppelin there as well, isn't there? It's
Yeah.
There's something of Zepp. There's something of Ravel, and it's such an enticing sequence. And I'm always writing down phrases that I think, yes, that would extend that. And I very rarely ever use them, but it's always when I'm on planes, I'm getting it. And it keeps coming at me. And I go, yes, one day, boys, we must do it with the Berlin Phil or something close.
Yeah.
One day, all of that, and indeed extend it and see if we can't use temp as well. Mm-hmm. So it's probably Rock Band augmented with all of that. It's an enticing piece, Florida Windshield. It really is.
It is fantastic. Now you mentioned just to touch on what you said about the ensemble, how important it is to feature them and be immersed in that, because obviously I'm saying to you, and lots of people must say the same thing, or you were there when this album was made, or the Genesis stuff. For the people within your band, they're probably fans and they weren't there. So for them, it's a different perspective for them, isn't it? It's a different context. So same as Phil's, it's a different emotional feel as they perform, songs like Dancing in the Moonlight Night and all that. It must be so different for them.
Yes, it is. And that song always has its challenges because from bar to bar, it keeps changing. And a song like that starts off with Peter Gabriel singing something that's influenced by Scottish plain song. So a cappella, singer, a lonely singer on a hill, no effect on the vocal, just dead dry. And then it does its Elgarian hymn-like thing, and then those extraordinary mellotron voices kick in, and it's as if Mozart's arrived for a moment, and then you're off on this chase, really, where everyone's playing flat out, really. I still struggle to play that guitar solo. Sometimes I get it right. Some nights. Other nights, foot goes down, missed the pedal, bugger, but, never the same twice and all that. And then right at the end of the song, the quietest jam, I like to think, that a rock band ever did or attempted to do live, and to do it and make it work and to take it right down. And again, have everyone playing sympathetically, non-heroically, but atmospherically.
Yeah, that's a nice phrase. Yeah.
We used to call it Disney, that section, because we thought that it had a sort of Disney-like
magical,
tranquil.
Yeah. Sense of wonder. It's that sense of wonder.
Sense of wonder. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I suppose it sort of, if you analyze the whole song, you would say that it headed into an area of resignation. Maybe there's a little bit of a similarity with the way Floyd were thinking with Comfortably Numb, the idea of resignation that's part of British music and perhaps not so much part of American music, but we've got a little bit of a tradition of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Steve. The tour starts in October, so go to hackettsongs.com, and Bay of Kings and Momentum are out now, and they're just beautiful albums, Steve. I absolutely
glad you like them. I'm glad
love them.
that I play odd tracks. I can't face listening to the whole thing, and I put on old tracks, and I think that's not bad. I thought that wasn't right at the time, but
Yeah.
that's not bad. Maybe I used too much reverb on it, but then again, it was supposed to be that siesta. So
Yeah.
Just on quietly. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe one day in the future, we'll have an orchestral version of the Circus and the Night Whale played in its entirety.
Well, how about that? Wouldn't that be something? Yes, that would be a challenge.
That would
Absolutely.
Well, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much,
Lovely
Steve.
talking, mate.
Great talking to you again. Thank you very much.
Phil.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
A huge thank you to my guest, Steve Hackett. That's the third time I've spoken to Steve, and it's absolutely a great honor to talk to him. I'm just, as you can probably tell from my face and now I'm talking, I just think what he does and how he performs as a guitarist is just superb. One of the phrases I was trying to ask him to one of my questions was the rage he has when he plays electric guitar, the tapping he does. And he was one of the first people to do this. And the tremolo arm, which must wonder if it's going to make it through the rest of the gig, such is the ferociousness of his electric guitar playing. But then when he's playing nylon string guitar, classical guitar, it is like the gentlest of notes, like raindrops just falling in the distance and every one of them landing on target. It's such an amazing player. And wherever you dip into Steve's back catalogue, and whether it is Genesis, and I have to say, I feel that the way that the Genesis songs have been interpreted by the Steve Hackett Band and Steve himself is taking this music in a totally different path in a way. It is like the new classical music. It's called classic rock. That's how we know it, or progressive rock. But these pieces of music have taken on another almost a worldly factor in how they're performing and how it makes the audience feel. Steve mentioned about music healing and how it changes things. And of course, from Now Spinning magazine, that's a big part of how I feel about things, that music is healer and the doctor. And when you watch the audience, whether it's on a Steve Hackett DVD or you're in the crowd and this is music that you may know from years ago, or you've just heard it for the first time, the way it comes across without words sometimes, the way it affects us, it's truly a wonderful thing. But the tour starts in October and there's tons of dates. It's a massive tour, but the Circus and the Night Whale is a wonderful autobiographical album. And it's fantastic. I hope he does do that one day in its entirety. And Bay of Kings and Momentum, 2 classical albums out on vinyl for the first time. They've been tweaked as well. I think the extra bits have been put on them, but they are sublime. They really are. But Lamb Lies Down, it's a double album, but Steve's interpreted, literally sequenced it in a way that looks brilliant, and it will be awesome. I wonder if there'll be a DVD of this tour. I wonder. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe to the podcast, to the YouTube channel. Check out the website. You can buy merch for Now Spinning magazine. And remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Keep spinning those discs, and I'll see you all very, very soon.